Hey, what's going on, guys? It's that time. Season 5's upon us, and we got a whole bunch of changes, a whole bunch to talk about, but we'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I know we got a lot to cover, but so I wanted to go through a few of the changes that we're going to see for Necromancer for Season 5, some expectations for Season 5, and of course, we're going to highlight Bone Spirit. Bone Spirit is going to be our number one build, but I do think we have some other things that need to be brought up just in the understanding of what this season is going to look like for Necro right now. So a lot of you may have seen we had a lot of changes with the patch notes and the campfire that really negatively impacted Necromancer in general. The nerfs to Wither and the Blighted aspect were pretty massive. And it is said in the previous video for discussing the patch notes, like Blighted was needed. Blighted was definitely too strong, but paired with Wither, it was really a huge nerf to Shadow builds, and there really wasn't anything returned in compensation to bring those builds back up to par. I know we all saw the patch notes after the campfire, and they showed us the new aspects that had massive multipliers and then immediately took them away. And unfortunately, that does mean that these Shadow builds are back in the same position they were when we had the original patch notes and really just saw those massive changes to the Shadow primarily. The other builds were brought up some. All the builds other than Shadow builds did have some pretty good changes, even with the changes to Lucian's Helmet and the Lokran's Amulet. It still brings a lot of those builds back up to a competitive state with the other builds, excluding Bone Spirit. So I do think what we're going to see is a much more consistent selection of what builds you can play that are competitive. And I think it's worthy to note that it really is going to depend this season what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. If your goals are to just push Pit, Bone Spirit, there's just nothing really that's going to compete with Bone Spirit. Most of the other classes aren't going to compete with the Bone Spirit build. And a lot of that we'll discuss with the changes when we go through the actual Bone Spirit build here in just a moment. But Bone Spear got some pretty good changes to it. Even the stuff that it currently utilizes, such as having the ability for the double cast Bone Spears on the new Deathless Visage, or having that Starless Skies has attack speed now instead of more additive in that place. So we got some really good changes to some of the items that really impact a lot of builds. Blood Surge got some major buffs, and I do think you're going to see a lot more play with that. Blood Lance got a few buffs. Sever is going to be a very competitive build. However, when we look at the rest of the Shadow builds, Blighted Corpse Explosion is really not going to have much. It wasn't doing much damage to begin with in Season 4, and it got nerfed, and then there really was nothing that brought it up to meeting these other builds. Blight in itself, it didn't do any damage, and it got a marginal increase in damage itself, which was cool, but even then it was absolutely abysmal damage. And with the changes to Ebon Piercer itself, while Ebon Piercer will still perform okay, we're not going to see it pushing the same way that it was in Season 4. So really what this is going to be is most of these builds are going to be able to easily compete and complete tier 100 pluses. They're not going to push to the furthest, but that's okay. For not everyone is looking to push into those high pit tiers. Some people are just looking to push pits and get those upgrade materials. So any build that you enjoy, run with it. You're going to be able to do the content. You're going to be able to kill bosses. You're going to be able to kill world bosses and compete with tormented bosses. But it's important to note that it's really up to you and what you personally are looking to achieve out of this season. Overall, the quality of life changes that we saw for this season are really dope. We get to experience some of the changes for resetting bosses that are immediately resetting after you kill the tormented bosses. Awesome quality of life change. The new mechanic for Pit or Horde is going to be incredible. The fact that they added in the ability to run those in lower tiers is also incredible. Gives you that jump in and see what that in-game mechanic is going to look like, and also increasing the rewards that you get as you increase your difficulty is a really cool change. Of course, the reputation system that's carrying over, and they've added some new stuff. It is really cool. The seasonal mechanic of those quests within the seasonal journey are really cool. So the season itself looks great. The quality of life changes look really good, and I feel like we're in a really good place in terms of what they're giving us for those quality of life. And all that being said, I really don't like the position that Necromancer's in. Really, if you're trying to push pits and being said you got to run this build is not ideal, but it is what it is. So I do look to see if there's anything that changes in that meta going into Season 5. We know that there are some interactions that we're going to be looking at testing and seeing if any of them do have some maybe unintended interactions, or maybe they were intended and we just haven't found them yet. So there could be a sleeper build out there we're not aware of yet. It's just not made itself available and we're not aware of it yet. So that's pretty much the summation of what's going on for Season 5. And I do want to go through this Bone Spirit build. This is the one we put together last season that pushed the highest pits. A lot of changes happened with it, and I do want to discuss what those changes look like, and really what you're going to be focusing on this season with this build. All right, so now that we've gone through all the mechanics and stuff, the changes, the quality of life, expectations for Season 5, I want to go through the Bone Spirit build. The changes that we've got to it going into Season 5 are awesome. We got some really cool new tools. And while all the other Necromancer builds saw at best some slight changes and increases, Bone Spirit itself got absolutely bonkers changes. It's absolutely wild, all the changes that we got and improvements we got for this build. So first up is, going through the PTR, we had the PTR expectation that the Chronolution was going to be a fill-in for this build, but the changes that were received post the PTR really killed it for this build, while Chronolotion is going to fit in some other builds. This one's not it. We lose the max essence, and we can't justify that amount of damage increase for losing the max essence and not having an essence regen. So one quick thing to note about the helmet slot. So the changes to Shaco, while they're detrimental in the fact that we're not getting the resource gen on them, and resource gen is going to be the common trend that I talk about over the next few minutes in terms of what this build is going to be needing. With Shaco losing that, it does have the redeeming quality that we have the CDR. So, as it stands right now, if there are no changes to rapid ossification to fix it to where it is getting a 4.5 second cooldown, it is going to be imperative that we use Shaco to be able to include the cooldown of not just Bone Spirit, but also Bone Prison as well. So if rapid ossification is not fixed and we are still on that low cooldown, we are going to use Shaco in this slot. However, if rapid ossification is fixed and we get the 4.5 cooldown and the 7-second cooldown for Bone Spirit, we're going to then be able to slot in a Legendary Helmet. Legendary Helmet will have the essence per second, max essence, and CDR on it. And be using the Bloodgetters aspect. Bloodgetters, talked about this a lot, gives us a 21% damage increase as well as a heal over time. And it also is going to just really fill that gap of, not fill the gap, but give us that additional damage, which is what we're shooting for. Here's the big booms. Chest slot, Hardened Bones. Also, having some thoughts on this one. Depending on how good Shielding Storm is, we very well may then slot in Shielding Storm here if we're using Shaco to then get rid of Blood Mist and use Bone Storm and have not just the DR from Shaco, but we then have the additional Shielding Storm. And as the devs said, they think that this actually may be overtuned. So we very well may slot this in if it is that good, because it's going to give us that additional defensive layer while also bridging the gap for that 20% crit chance on Bone Storm. And just giving us the overall consistency with more bone hits, with more bone crits to get some of the other passives going. So these two slots are the ones that are not set in stone yet. I do think that one or both very well could change, and we're going to know this pretty quickly when we go into the end game. We'll know this very quickly if these things are working. Hand slot, aspect of Grasping Veins. Same thing as the crit chance and crit damage multiplier. Blood Moon Breaches, while we did lose the amplified damage passive, that is more than made up for with the fact that these Blood Moon Breaches went from a 70% multiplier to a 150% multiplier. Absolutely massive. It just blows my mind how much of an increase these are. While this is going to help blood build substantially, it is actually going to make Bone Spirit itself unreal. On PTR, now, yes, we were using Crown Evolution. We were getting 12, 13 billion damage hits on PTR. We are now going to see even bigger hits than that with 150% multiplier on these pants, not including any of the other changes. Next up is going to be our boots. I absolutely love these boots and hate these boots. We lose the essence per second on it. We are able to pick up bone skills, which we had from having the bone spirit on the boots already, so we're not losing that. But one thing I think is really cool about these boots is we get an armor roll. An armor roll is going to allow us to not have to roll one on our other pieces of gear. So our chest plate, for example, where we may have had armor before, we're going to be able to roll int, macabre, and HP, or we can roll int, essence per second, and macabre. So it gives us free leeway to fit in other things in the build where we're not having to focus on an armor roll. So it's really cool. The Bone Prison cooldown is fantastic. Pair that with the fact that we're going to get rapid ossification for this. Is going to keep up our Bone Prison cooldown great. Now, the other big thing about this is going to be its legendary aspect, or its unique aspect. Couple things to note about the legendary aspect. These bone splinters can double cast. So as you see here on both the offhand and the main hand, I have here that we are going to be using the Temper for Bone Splinters projectiles to cast twice. Why this is impactful is each time one of those splinters that come from Bone Prison, it's going to give us 2 additional max essence. So if you hit a max out 30 bone splinters on these boots, that's going to give you 60 if they double cast, which is going to give you 120 essence just there. Now, that may seem like a lot, but even more so with using Requiem, when we cast Bone Prison, because this is a bigger area on these, we are going to get 10 minion triggers for the Requiem because it has 10 walls now. So one singular cast of Bone Prison has a potential to gain 190 essence on our max essence. So this is a massive boost in damage from a boot slot. So, we start to look at with these increased damages. We have the 150% multiplier now instead of the 70 on the pants. We now have 190 max essence here. So we're going to start to see really the damage ramp up from some of these new things. The next one's going to be main hand weapon. Imprisoned Spirits aspect. This is massive. This is a 1.7 multiplier, and essentially it is doubling your damage. Now, what it's actually doing is anytime a Bone Spirit hits within your Bone Prison, it is going to double cast. They do act independently. One can crit, one can overpower, both can overpower, and so forth. But this is incredible because this is where I was starting to see those 12 and 13 billion hits. I'd get an 8 billion hit, followed by a 5 billion hit, or a 7 and a 4. So we're starting to see some very huge damage numbers for this. Then again, with the increase in damage as well, we're going to start to see some of this hit for 10 and 5, 10 and 7, 10 and 7. We'll start to see those 17, 18 to 20 billion hits into this. So this is a big aspect for this, and I'm super excited to get this in a truly functioning build. The test that we did on PTR, we're in the Season 4 gear, didn't have time to go out and grind brand new gear and re-roll for all the stats. We wanted to make some of this fit. But even in the current gear from Season 4, we were still seeing those 12 billion hits. Alright, the next slot is going to be our Sacrificial or Serration in this slot. This is either going to be Serration or Sacrificial, and here's why. This is where we start to get into the Essence Regen conversation and what we've lost and how we're going to regain this. If we get to the point where we are not getting the Essence Regen we need, we very well may have to go in and sacrifice the mages that are going to give us the Essence Regen and Essence back. So Sacrificial will then become more important than Serration. Now, Serration is your highest damage up front, whereas Sacrificial is going to be much more in line with keeping our Essence Regen up. So this one, depending on where our regen ends up, very well could be in between the Serration and Sacrificial. Up next is our Requiem aspect. This is where we get 7 essence per minion. This is incredibly vital to maintaining that 275 we need to activate Banished Lords. And again, as soon as you cast Bone Prison, you are guaranteed 70. And then again, each one of those from the Splinters, but that's not a minion, but we're going to be getting that 7 extra essence for each minion now. Next aspect of Torment, this is going to give us 170% essence regen for every time we have a crit on a bone skill. We're going to be critting 100%. Our splinters are going to be critting for 100% from Triad Ghouls. So this is always going to be active. And our essence per second is going to be coming from both the hat and the chest, unless it's just coming from the chest, and that's going to be coming. Then we'll have Shaco in that slot, but this is always active. It's always regening a lot, paired with the Macabre to grant the immediate essence regen. This is incredibly vital to keeping your constant regen going. And lastly, we have the Vanished Lords. This really was a terrible change, in my opinion, to this item. We are losing the resource generation, and we're losing the crit strike chance. However, we're gaining a little bit more attacks, or we're gaining attack speed on this. So when you look at where we're losing the essence regen, so we're losing the resource gen here. We lost it from Shaco if we were slotting that in there. We are losing it from our helmet slot, the 8 energy per second there, if we have to use Shaco. And we've already lost 8 essence per second from our boots. So why this is a big conversation is we were pretty much in line where we could recast on command in Season 4 with all of that Essence Gen. So losing Essence Gen from our helmet slot, our boot slot, and now our amulet slot, we have lost a substantial amount of our ability to sustain our max Essence, or our Essence pool. Now, where some of this is going to come back, we do get some from the boots. Every time these act as Bone Splinters, we're getting the Bone Splinters Essence back from that. Every time we cast Bone Prison, and with the cooldown being incredibly low, we're going to be able to cast that a lot. We're getting that as a Macabre cast from our Ring Temper slot of getting the Essence back on Macabre cast. So that it's all adding up. But the big question will be, do we have enough to sustain with the current setup, and do we have to use the Mage Sack, or are we having to figure out, do we lose the boots? Hopefully that's not the answer. But there's a lot of moving pieces with our Essence Gen. So overall, the build itself is going to be incredibly high hitting. We very well may have to make some tweaks to maintain that Essence, because at minimum, we have to be able to cast at 275 Essence per cast. So really, when you're looking at it, is where all those come from. Skills and Paragon are going to stay the same, but one big change that we're getting here is going to be from our Bloodbath node. This is going from 35% to 70%, so once again, we're getting a 100% increase in damage from this node here, which is incredibly massive for the build. When you pair it with some of the other massive changes we're getting from like the Blood Moon Breaches, which was over 100% increase in damage. This is 100% increased damage. So really great changes. And I'm really looking forward where this build develops. I don't really know that we're going to have the Essence Gen to go for the perma-cast on Bone Spirit. You may have seen in the PTR video that I put out, it was a much slower gameplay. We didn't have the same Essence Gen, so Bone Spirit was being cast at a little bit slower intervals, even though it was hitting for well over 3 times the damage. So those are the changes. I'm going to go ahead and get this planner. I'll put this in the description at the bottom. And if you got any questions, hit me up. We're going to be streaming this all week as we grind it out and start getting it leveled up. And speaking of leveling up, I wanted to go through what my expectations are for my own personal season start. Just so anybody has any questions about that as well. I can tell you that on PTR, minions were still absolutely phenomenal at getting your leveling up. We're still going to be able to easily enter capstones at half of the level that's expected, and we're going to be able to get to World Tier 4 incredibly quickly. Why this is important is they've increased the level cap to where you're getting the experience, so the quicker you get to the higher tiers, the more experience you're going to be to pile on. Then being able to also get extra mind cages this season and being able to stack those multiple times is going to be incredible. We'll be able to get just even same level Helltide, we can increase that to 30 levels above us by stacking 3 of those mind cages. So it's going to be very important to be able to get to those high tiers, high world tiers quickly and efficiently. So me personally, I'm going to be going with the minions again. I very well may go into Sever minions like I did last season and then transition into this as I start to get the gear. Now, one thing to note about Bone Spirit, this will not function until you get your essence management and your crit management going. So early on, before you start to get all of your gear, two things to really look for. You're going to be looking for the Swelling Curse aspect, which is going to give us additional crit strike chance. And we're also going to be looking for Shattering aspect, which is going to give us Essence regen on every mob hit. It's huge. So be on the lookout for those two if you want to transition into Bone Spirit early. So that's all I got for this. Let me know your thoughts on Season 5, what you're doing with it. And if you have any questions, you guys know where I'm at. And thanks as always for watching, and we'll talk to y'all soon.